Hi, friends. Welcome to our Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance community conversation. We started these conversations and will be having them weekly. It's my hope that conversations are taking place that will help us find common ground and address racial and ethnic inequities that are present in our country. The Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance, also known as LEDA, can help find common ground. I am Gloria Lara, and I'm honored to be the Executive Director of the Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance. Since 1996, we have focused on dismantling barriers and advancing equity by working to build and sustain more racially and ethnically equitable communities. Our work is done by meeting organizations, educational institutions, middle and high school students, employers and employees, and our communities face to face. In other words, LEDA is a bridge. We build bridges and help build bridges between different parts of the community, different organizations, and different people. My hope is that the barriers and inequities that come to light in such tragic ways are deliberately addressed in a way that respects all parties. And now I'm really pleased to introduce Henry Cherry. Henry is the Director of Engagement of Christ at Christ Memorial Church in Holland, Michigan. And Henry has also been in Holland for much of his life, a really active community member. So, Henry, as I said before, you've been a part of the Holland community for many years, having grown up here and then returned after spending a few years in Chicago. Can you please tell us your thoughts in helping to arrange Georgia's peaceful unity demonstration on June 7th in Holland?
Well, first off, thank you, Laura, for having me. I appreciate being to come out here and build with you guys and just be involved in what you guys already have established. When I think about the George Floyd peaceful march, we actually rescheduled it. It was in the wake of what happened in Grand Rapids that Saturday night, early Sunday morning. Our initial march was scheduled for that following Sunday, and so we relooked at it, and at a point we were really uneasy at if we could keep everyone safe. So we kind of rescheduled it for the following week, which allowed us a little more time to think about what we wanted to do. And myself and two others, Shatavia Ward, and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on another name. But we sat and I just proposed like, hey, what would we look if we use the bridge as a opportunity to show what Holland could look like and what unity, if we wanted to live into the title of that bridge, what it could be in our city. So that was kind of what went into it, and also really wanting to elevate the voices of our youth and having them speak out and have a seat at the table. That was one of our main focuses in that.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate your initial thoughts of trying to keep everyone safe. And in case viewers are wondering, Henry is in his vehicle, but he is parked. He's a man on the move, so he's in a safe place and he's turned off his car, so he is spending time with us, and we're really grateful for your time. So tell us a little bit more about your thoughts regarding the peaceful unity demonstration. What were your expectations, and what did it turn out to be?
I would say expectations were we start seeing the numbers start increasing day to day, and we were looking at, I think we were at just over 1,000 people were saying that they were going to come, and then we had another large amount of people that said maybes. In all honesty, I think we were really hoping if we could get 1,000 people there, we felt like we had completely overseeded what our hopes were. And then So we reached out. I had a meeting with Holland Police Department, as well as the Ottawa County Sheriff the Thursday before the event. It was a great opportunity to kind of let them know what we were looking to do, and help with some of the safety measures that we're looking to put into place. And I actually finding a location that would allow for us to do both those things. And so, with within that conversation, we came up with the space that we use and kind of how we would need police to exercise their ability in helping keep us safe. And so they had some designated areas that they asked if that would be appropriate for them to be at. And so it was, yeah, so it was kind of all hands on deck, so to speak, with that.
Oh, great. Walk us through the events of that day. You know, as you got to the park where we first gathered, and then as we moved along to the Unity Bridge, what were you thinking? And you know,
I'm sorry, my Bluetooth cut off on me.
Station 104.5.
you still there?
I'm here, but my volume is cutting off on me.
If you restart your car, and then because it cuts off after about 15 minutes, lots of
Sorry,
times.
good.
So I'm going to take you off the stream, and then just wave at me when your Bluetooth is ready.
All right.
Okay, can you hear me?
I think I can hear you now.
Yep, I can hear you as well. You need to be a little louder.
I'm just gonna do this with my car. Put it on speaker there because.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
And you sound fine. You sound great. So, okay. Good. So the question that I asked you was, I know the electronics try to think for us.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. So I asked you, what were you thinking when you first got to the park where we gathered? And then as you saw the crowd getting bigger, and then as we marched along?
Besides being nervous and walking to the restroom several times before people start showing up, we got out there probably about 2 to 3 hours earlier just to set up with sound, and getting trash cans in place, and some of the information that we wanted was, we wanted to start a kind of a collaborative piece of getting down names and emails, and then as we have resources coming in for those that were looking for more material to go a little bit deeper in anti-racism work, we wanted to make that available to them. So we had some tables set up on that, and we had a number of volunteers from the community, whether it be faith-based or just those that were out willing to be a part of it, came up and set up tables for us and helped us with that measure, just to make sure we can continue the conversation. That it was just, our whole thought process was like, we wanted this to be an initiation of a conversation here in Holland, with those that were coming out and showing their support by way of physically being in the park or driving by with flags and whatever, that we could just continue the conversation, and not let the baton drop.
So I guess the question that people have is, what inspired you besides, George Floyd's death? What really gave you that push forward to say, you know what, I've got to do this?
I think sometimes we look for other people to do things, and sometimes it really is on us to be the ones that are really the ones that we're looking for. And for me, it was definitely putting me outside of my comfort zone. I think I looked for probably, I didn't say I looked, I talked to probably like 3 other people to do on the speech at the park. But finally, it kind of fell on myself. Um, but yeah, for me, it's really when I grew up in this community, I know some of the things that I was at that were barriers for me and I struggled with. I'm a graduate of Holland High School, and have been here for the majority of my life. And so we're just knowing, like, if not me, then who? And do I want to keep seeing the same things that I dealt with and I struggled with in having the kids that I work with and the youth that I work with, and the families I work with, continue the same dialogue of the same barriers, the same struggles in here, and the fact that we're not really seeing the change that we need, that's necessary here for people of color to feel like Holland is actually home and not just a space where they reside.
Great. You mentioned the children and the youth that you work with. I know that you spent much of your time working with youth here in Holland. Can we talk about how you've observed different treatments of Black and Latinx students, especially when it comes to discipline for school offenses? My understanding is that school offenses such as smoking, vandalism, leaving without permission, obscene language are either a yes or no offense. Either a student has done these or not. Other school offenses, such as disrespect, excessive noise, loitering, and threatening behavior, are measured subjectively. That is, it's a person's opinion whether or not a student has done these or not. Can you
Right.
please talk about your observations?
Yeah. So I spent about 4.5 years as a site supervisor at Holland High School, and in that time, I worked in elementary school as well. Um, when you start getting in the ballpark of intimidation, it is easier for staff to gravitate to a student of color being intimidating or having an intimidating presence simply if they're not wanting to follow the rules. So this is easier language that's used in that. Um, and we know why. Like, these are all things that have been historically descriptive of people of color. And so when those things go unchecked, that becomes the narrative in that space. And so when you have a difference in culture, you're always going to have a disconnection if you're not willing to understand the other person's culture. And if we don't have those things in place in a school setting like Holland, I would say from a district standpoint, I believe they're at about 56 to 57% student of color. And then if you look at the flip side of that, there's less than 1% staff of color. Um, you're going to have disconnections across the board if intentional work's not being done in those spaces to bring not just the students but the staff up to speed and know some things that they don't know and address their blind spots. Um, we can't have. I struggle with the fact that we put the onus on kids to learn how to code switch. To me, that's kind of irresponsible, for the onus to be placed on our kids to be able to operate in both spaces and not have the adults and those in leadership learn how to do that as well. Because really that sets up more barriers for our Black and brown students. And therefore there is frustration, and there's certain times where students will act out and they'll say, you're being racist. And it's met with, no, they didn't do anything that was racist. But there's overt and there's this other form of racism that we just don't want to call it. We don't want to name it because sometimes we're uncomfortable to name it. So when you have students that are able to call that out, I think we need to really take a real subjective look in those situations and see actually what was going on and see what the disconnect is. Um, in my experiences, I've never pulled the race card unless I absolutely felt like it was something dealing with an issue with my race. And so with our students, I don't think we can sit there and just kind of kind of just continue the conversation without really addressing, like, is this a race issue? Is this something that we're unaware of as a predominantly white staff building, that we're missing our mark on certain areas? And I think until we do that and really like look at ourselves subjectively and put some things in place to where um, it's part of, I don't want to say it's mandated, but it's part of your job is to do these trainings and be involved in ongoing trainings about cultural education and understanding racism and how to dismantle. Like, I think those things are just all have to be part of what it is for staff to be involved in working with students. I know if we're dealing with trauma and you're dealing with a student that's dealt with a amount of trauma, you're definitely going to have a certain amount of training in that field before you are interacting with that student. And so if we know that's necessary, then why not the other piece too?
Right. Yeah, you mentioned a lot of items in there. You talked about how children and youth get treated differently based on your observation is that, it's based on racially, in a way, having the predominant uh, teachers, educators, and staff be white and very, very few educators of color. Um, we also talked about how that transferred over to educational attainment and achievement. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So if we have a disconnect with our students, um, how many students do you think you would have really signing up to be in AP and honor courses when those spaces are predominantly white? And then so if you do have, based on recommendations from prior teachers or staff or even parents wanting their kids to be in other classes, um, think about being the only one person of color in that space from an academic standpoint. Um, it doesn't really feel inviting for our students. I remember we had a meeting and we were going to talk, and it was in an AP class, and we had Black students talking about their experience living in Holland. I only had one of my students come because even if I was going to be in there, they still felt so uncomfortable being in that space and having to share their stories with really not many people looking like them in that space. And so they really felt a heavy amount of judgment, um, like an inadequacy of being in that space. And so we really had some real open conversations out of that. And they just said, hey, if we were somewhere else and there was more people that looked like me in that space, I would be in there because I'd feel more comfortable. Like there's some other people that had my back. When I go in that space, I feel like I'm going in that space by myself. And so for me, that speaks to if we're really looking at being inclusive, then we need to start creating some other avenues for students to be onboarded into those honor and AP classes. And it can't just be the students that we deem that, oh, they're different than the other students of color. And I hope understand what I'm saying when I say that.
Yeah, exactly. Having been born and grown up in East Los Angeles, I sort of seen some of that as well. You also talked about some of the resources that aren't always, in your observation or experience, evenly distributed among different groups of youth. Can you share a little bit about that? You're talking
Yeah, I
about,
think for me, like the most glaring one is our the reading portion, because now we have standardized tests. Obviously, this past year, those were implemented due to COVID, and from what I'm hearing, they're not going to be implemented this year too, just based off of COVID as well and how we're rolling school out and the lack of in-class sessions that we've had over the past year. But having a third grade reading assessment where you have to do very poorly on it to fail, but there's another barrier then. So if we don't have if our students aren't coming in on on par with where they're at reading. The reading opportunities, the reading coaches, and the other places, the other resources that are put in place, there's not enough. Um, for my time in the elementary building, we had 3 reading coaches in the building, and they were working continuously all day. So this is nothing against what they're doing, but they're only able to work with 4 to 5 kids at that time. If we know like close to 60% of our students in that building aren't on par with their reading level, then, and you're talking about a building of close to 400 students, um, reading of interventions like just reading coaches and stuff like that, that is not enough to meet the heavy need that we have. And that's from an elementary standpoint. When I look at from like our 9th grade reading interventions that we have, and I'm only speaking for Holland Public. We have Reading 180, which is like a 2 class. One of my favorite teachers is the teacher that teaches it. But we know the spaces for that class. It's a 2-hour class, so there's 30 in each. So you got 60 interventions in place for 9th grade students coming into your building. They're pulled out of a group of 300 students who actually need the intervention, but because of funding for the school and the amount of slots available that the school can have and really meet the need in a real way, you have 240 kids that go without receiving any reading interventions from that reading intervention. So what are they doing? They're in class, they're trying to do work. Sometimes, then we formulate, if we're not getting work done in class, what usually happens with those students, they then become disruptive in class, maybe less engaged, or they tend to, kind of fade out and phase out of school. They stop going to class because they'd rather kind of keep their integrity of them thinking that their peers thinking that they're just as smart, as opposed to going in class and knowing that they're not on the same level of engaging the academics as their peers. And so you have a ripple effect where behavior is high, but behavior is high mostly because of a lack of academic engagement, though.
What you're talking about and what you described is something that's always, if you want to make change and if you're a leader in that particular field or in that area, don't always go to, the very top or the leaders in that area, but go to the people who are doing the work, who are able to, put who have the feet on the ground, the boots on the ground, actually working one-on-one with the children or talking with them. And that, so your observations are really pertinent and should be part of whatever type of decisions are made. So thank you for that. So a question for you is, what do you recommend to remedy that situation, and how do people get involved to volunteer?
I would
Like the reading coaches, are they volunteers or do they need to be certified?
So they are. I know they're staff in the building. They're staffed in the building, but we've had retired teachers coming in. I cannot think of her name, but she is a definite like math warrior. She comes to school. She's been retired for several years. She comes in probably 3 to 4 times a week just to do reading or math intervention with students, and she does it one-on-one. Sometimes she goes in the class because due to cut funding, we've had to remove the co-taught classes that had the workshop teacher available in class to work with students right in the moment of needing assistance with whatever class they're working with. They're now out of the class, and now those kids only get 1 hour a day than to receive support in the 5 to 6 different other courses that they're working in, as opposed to having an aide or an assistant teacher in the class. Some of those are just simply going to the school and saying, I would like to help out in this manner. The way I look at it is like, if we can catch these things with our kids before they get to middle school, they have a better opportunity rectifying where they're at and getting back up to speed. And this is not something that's long term, because another thing, when you look at mass incarceration, prison beds are built by way of those students that fail reading by 5th grade. So if you're not passing and you're not doing well and you're not on par to read, they are literally building a prison bed for that student. Now, this is information that's out there. You can look that up. But yeah, that's the bigger issue too.
Thank you. Hang on one quick sec.
No
Sorry about that.
worries.
So, what you're talking about, basically is reading or not having a good path in reading is really a root cause to a lot of the issues that you've seen with youth.
Yeah.
That's really something to think about, and I think we can explore at another time. We have a few minutes left. Can you please talk about what you do now as a Director of Engagement at Christ Memorial Church in Holland?
Yeah. So in this position, I have my target area it's a mile radius of the church, which just so happens to be probably like 4 schools that I've worked in, which allows for some easy collaborative work in those spaces. Um, what I focus on is always be trying to continuously be constant in the community, so I can kind of keep an ear to the streets and know what's going on. And then working with our team, um, we have resources available, whether that's our open arms ministry that works with families that are either trying to get housing or retain their housing, or uh, taking care of bills because of whatever situation, whether it be the light, water, whatever, and making sure that they're able to continue their ability to live in their residence. We have an after school program that Amy Mars runs. That's Tuesdays and Thursdays, where we're working with students. We've actually partnered with Jefferson, and it's become one of the reading interventions for students in their school. And we also have our Kids Hope program that goes into the schools, and what it's doing is it puts a mentor with a student, at least for 1 hour a week, that they're able to talk about life and education. And sometimes those relationships then bloom and blossom into relationships with home as well, and outside of just the regular school year. As far as myself, some of the things I do, I look at trying to get churches to work together, which is one thing which could be kind of difficult here in Holland. But I think using relationship over program has been one way of having that come together a little bit better. Also, just looking to move people from our church and their lens and seeing what is going on in our city. What does our city actually look like? What does our city actually need? And how does the church get involved, as opposed to it falling on HPD, Holland Public Schools, or a school system to meet some needs? How do we move as a body of faith out into these spaces and build relationships and be those that are out to to deliver hope to our community, no matter where they're located. You know, it's easy to go to Mel Lanes and go there and see that there's not much going on there from an economic standpoint. But when you go there and we do our reading program there on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoon, and you have anywhere from 30 to 40 kids with some of their parents out as well, and we're engaging them with lunch, with reading opportunities, and getting them to be able to create their own library at home. It just, you begin to see the hope, and you begin to see some joy, and you see these kids being able to do things. You see parents feeling encouraged because you're recognizing their kids as valuable. And so it creates this dynamic of we have this community up there that we're able to do life with, and we're able to touch base with them about what needs are, how to pray with them, how to walk alongside of them. And I think that could only just continue to dig deeper the more we have church bodies getting involved and doing these things in the communities that they are built around. Um, yeah, and so from that standpoint is just encouraging our churches, capital C church, to get involved in our city and be the light in our city, as opposed to other entities doing that.
Great. Question for you that popped up. Have you thought, or are there plans for another peaceful march or demonstration? Or is there some other action that you might recommend for those who wish to support the Black Lives Matter movement?
What I could do, we put together a series of informative conversations. I'd put it that way. I don't think they're more like lectures or PowerPoints. So they're more of a conversation. We have finished 2 weeks worth of those. Our third is this week coming up on Thursday. Gloria, I can share that link with you and invite you, and you can put that out to any of the members that have attended this. It's live on Facebook. You can follow through, ask questions very similar to kind of what we're doing here. But there is a number of pieces of information that we brought to you. The first week, it's called going from ally to accomplice. And so, hey, you're on board, you're gaining some traction, you're looking for material to read, you're looking to try to get a little bit deeper in your understanding of what's going on and how you can be proactive in your space. This will be exactly for you on that. We've had the first week we had 101 follow and view consistently. Second week was a little bit of a tougher conversation. We talked about breaking down what defunding the police actually is. And so we had about 80 people there, and some of that was about in our educational system as well, about reallocating resources in our community to our schools to get necessary resources in the building, as opposed to having a police presence in our building. This week they're going to be on another real tough topic on like, now how do you dismantle systems? How do you look at a system and you dismantle it from bottom up? And so my wife is a part of that one. Another two friends of mine are a part of this presentation that they're going to be doing tomorrow. I would love for you guys to tune in. It starts at 6 o'clock, and typically they go for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, but that's with open time for questions, and they're going to do a good job of kind of bringing you along slow, stopping, letting you take a deep breath, and then diving back in after questions. So for me, that's one way, because we always have our list of resources available to you, whether it's reading or podcasts out there, or other interviews and stuff that you may be interested in. All those items are right available for you.
Great, thank you. We'll be certain to post that. It appeared in our feed, but we'll also do a separate posting for that in case people are interested. So one more question. Are there any parting thoughts that you would like to share with us?
We may not have been the ones to have brought about what we're dealing with, but it is sitting in our laps and in our hands to do the work to dismantle it. So we're not leaving it for our grandkids or for our great grandkids. For me, I really look at it as I know what my experience was growing up, and to this point of being 42. I don't want that for my son. I don't want that for my daughters. I definitely don't want that for my grandchildren. And so, um, when you think about what fuels you, those are all definite logs on the fire for me. And I would encourage you to kind of take that same look at at your own family structure. What don't you want to leave to your kids? What way that you do in your space and your location and vocation right now to change things for the better? It doesn't have to be something as big as a peaceful march. It could be something that your conversation that you're having at your in your place of employment. That's moving the needle. All those things add up. And so just finding your niche or finding your area, and then just um, just not just operating from a no fear standpoint, and just knowing that what you're doing is you're really investing in those that have yet to come, or those that are coming up right now.
Great. Thank you, Henry. Thank you so much. Please stick around for a couple of minutes afterwards.
Yes.
And thank you, friends, for watching. Some of the things that Henry was talking about are parts are what are included in our pledge, LEDA's pledge, a call to action, our commitment to dismantling racism. If you go to our homepage, the pledge is right there. Here's our website. And you can click right there, read the pledge, download it. And there's 7 different items that Henry alluded to, some of them, like educating yourself, like having a place to have safe conversations, things like that. If you're interested, please sign the pledge. We've had a lot of community leaders sign it, as well as just people like you and I who are very interested in focusing in on this and becoming allies and accomplices. And this will hopefully hold yourself accountable. You can hold yourself accountable to that. So again, thank you so much for tuning in today. Please keep an eye on our Facebook page, and where we will announce our next speaker for next week. Thank you so much, and take care.